Welcome back to Breakfast. 6:45. It's been revealed that Chinese university students in New Zealand were offered 3 free meals in exchange for turning up to welcome Premier Li in Wellington. Translated WeChat messages also say that volunteers will receive a surprise thank you letter. That comes amidst concerns being raised about Chinese foreign interference in New Zealand. And for more, we're joined by Director of International Relations at Otago University, Robert Patman. Always a pleasure to have you on, Robert. Can you tell us these messages? How do you take these? Propaganda or something less sinister than that?
Well, authoritarian states do mobilise people, and Premier Li's visit has obviously the regime in Beijing has decided they need to mobilise Chinese students here, and so that we shouldn't be that surprised. He refused to take questions after the meeting with Chris Luxon, although Chris Luxon had a press conference on his own, I think. So, yeah, I mean, this is authoritarian states. They like to use the freedoms of liberal democracies to show their appreciation and to protest sometimes, but they do not allow such things without supervision at home.
Why is it important for them to mobilise forces and actually have people out to show support publicly like that?
Well, I suppose to create a good atmosphere for the relationship. It certainly makes an impression in Wellington if lots of Chinese students turn up to greet the Premier from China, and also, I suppose, show their appreciation of the importance of the bilateral relationship between the two countries.
A lot's been made about the significance of such a high-ranking individual coming over from China to visit. In the discussions about things like AUKUS, where does the power lay here, really? Because New Zealand needs to economically benefit from China, but China has obviously been quite stern about its potential involvement with AUKUS.
Yes, the Chinese are deeply concerned. There's been a series of warnings from both the Chinese ambassador to New Zealand and other Chinese officials. And Wang Yi, the foreign minister who visited not so long ago and had meetings with Mr. Peters, New Zealand foreign minister, also expressed concerns. But it seems at the moment that both sides are agreeing to disagree. New Zealand hasn't made its mind up about AUKUS and probably won't do so until after the American election, in my view. In the meantime, we do know from yesterday's meeting, and this meeting is going to be talks over the next few days, that there's been agreements on trade, economics, and the environment. And this is part of Mr. Luxon's, vision. He said on the campaign trail, even before he became Prime Minister, that he wanted to strengthen relations with China in the economic sphere. But we're having to balance, and this has always been a balancing act in the relationship between New Zealand and China. China is a dictatorship, it's a one-party state. We're a liberal democracy. So there are profound political differences. So far, we've managed to manage that relationship without too much difficulty, although there have been concerns. Professor Anne-Marie Brady of Canterbury University has done a lot of fine work in drawing our attention to Chinese interference activities in this country. So we can't be complacent.
When do you think that tipping point comes into play? Because it's all well and good being able to walk the tightrope, but at some point, eventually, you're going to have to make a decision. Do you think that's coming anytime soon?
It could, but I think the ball is in China's court. The fact that Mr. Luxon said yesterday publicly he won't tolerate Chinese interference, and the fact that we're in exploratory talks with AUKUS may be a disincentive for China to continue with these sort of activities. But I don't think authoritarian states can really help themselves. And I don't mean that in a dismissive way. I mean that if you're an authoritarian state and you do not tolerate opposition at home, you're not particularly attractive to the outside world. So how do you have influence? You try to recruit influence within a target country, and that's probably what's been going on here.
A lot is raised to the Prime Minister at press conferences with journalists about whether he'll talk about things like AUKUS, things like human rights abuses, treatment of Uyghur Muslims, that sort of thing. Really behind closed doors, how robust do you think those discussions are? Do you think they're paid lip service and then really the focus is on trade?
From New Zealand's point of view, going back to the previous government, we certainly know that the Ardern and the Hipkins leaderships both raised issues relating to human rights, and I'm sure this government does as well. And Mr. Peters didn't pull any punches with the Foreign Minister Wang Yi when he visited Wellington. So I think it is a balancing act, and the balance depends on to what extent China is trying to affect our political system. From New Zealand's point of view, agreeing to disagree is fine. That we entered that business relationship or that free trade relationship with China on that basis. But I think the tipping point from the question you asked is whether China was trying to actually influence our political system. That wouldn't be tolerated, and I think that would be a tipping point.
Thank you so much, Robert Patman, for joining us, as always.